Today's masterclass is about the Oyster Blade. We have the Oyster Blade here, and the purpose today is to do a food service butchery to get the best possible yield we can from this. So naturally, Oyster Blade on its own is a delicious cut. It's quite a remarkable piece of meat for the fact that it can do anything. Unlike any other cut off the body, it's capable of doing every type of cook. So whether you want to braise it, whether you want to stew it, whether you want to thin slice it, whether you want to grill it, they're all suitable. So quite a unique piece of meat, which makes it very versatile for your kitchen. But one of the common criticisms in food service butchery is when we turn this into a flat iron, and to turn into a flat iron, it means we need to remove that heavy part of the sinew that starts at the head of the oyster blade and runs all the way through to the tail. And usually when we do that, it's at the expense of yield. So I want to show you quite a clever trick I've picked up, and it's called the fish cut oyster blade. So to do this, we need to recognize the oyster blade head and the oyster blade tail. Fairly obvious, a thicker head portion, thinner tail portion. Heavier silver skin end and a few associated muscles, very thin end. So a fish cut oyster blade is all about recognizing that we have a head and we're about to produce two fillets. So from this piece, we'll have that head portion where a majority of the yield is lost. And the reason why I want to keep this as a whole solid piece, it's next to cheek meat, probably the most famous braising part of the body. That silver skin in there, while it looks tough when it's raw, when it cooks, it renders down and gives you an absolutely delicious finish. And if you haven't tried it before, cook it exactly the same as cheek meat. You're going to be really amazed at the result. So my favorite dish with this, as a matter of interest, is to braise that for a couple of hours, let it set in the fridge, cut it into dice, and then double cook it. Just use plenty of punchy flavor profiles on the outside, lots of aromatics, and what you get is that really crispy, delicious, aromatic punch of flavor in the face, and following behind that is that juiciness that comes from beautifully rendered silver skin, which is just going to lift the eating quality of this significantly. But back to business, fish cut oyster blade, register roughly the approximate area in which the head's coming from. So we just make a small incision here. Just going to take that knife down gradually, because I literally want to take it down to the point where I can start to feel that middle center, or that center section of silver skin that we're talking about. So we just need, in this first part, to just be a little bit ginger with the knife. You can see I'm actually wiggling the blade more than cutting. And once I get it down onto the silver skin, you'll be able to see what we're talking about here. You can see we've made that incision all the way down, wiggled the blade down until we can resting onto that silver skin. Now at this point, we want to trim off the external surface of the fat and silver skin, and also the internal surface of the silver skin. And this is actually the skin that sits on top of the scapular bone. Good idea to remember that some of this will have some bone fragment, and it's a good idea just to keep that part of the silver skin for your stocks, as opposed to adding it to a good braising dish. If you want to remove silver skin, you do need to remove the fat first. For the obvious reason, we've talked earlier in our sessions about letting the knife do the work and letting the knife find the least resistance. And we can't do that while there's fat there, because that will alter the direction of the blade while we're trying to remove it. So we're just going to quickly remove that silver skin off the top, slide it off. Once you remove the fat, that whole job's a lot easier. There's a little bit of fat on the end of that, but we'll keep that to one side so we can keep that nice and visual. Don't forget, we don't throw anything away anymore in our kitchens, and as a part of our zero waste policies in all kitchens, we can render down that fat and create a delicious product to cook our potatoes and things in with it. And it's always good to remind your customers about zero waste and the way you can help the environment. And rather than opening a jar of of palm oil. We can actually use that fat. It's actually quite a delicious fat as well. We forget that fat is actually nature's most potent flavour delivery device. And utilising that fat in our cooking only leads to great flavour. So what we're going to do, we're going to pick up parts of that silver skin. Again, loose grip on the knife, let the knife do the work, and it'll make its way down there, least path of resistance, and start to remove that silver skin for us. Just allow it to do the work. It's just worth the effort, because what we'll bring out of that is a much less yield loss when removing that silver skin. And we'll let the blade do all of that work. Still just got a bit of fat on top of that one, which is why that's taking a little bit of time. We keep our silver skin separate to make sure you mince that back in through your ragouts. Fantastic product to put into a beef ragout. And here now we're going to just see where the end of our cut has been, and make a similar incision, and just slowly work our knife down until we reach the silver skin. Once we've done that, once we find the silver skin, we are ready to go through the filleting of the beef oyster blade. And I'll just turn that over now so you can see just how close, just by wiggling that blade, we have brought the silver skin. It's nice and clean on both sides. We're able to remove our flat iron steaks. Now in this instance, make sure your blade's nice and flat. We're using a blunt knife for this job. That's because, again, we want that blade to run along that silver skin and take the least pathway of resistance. So as I'm moving this blade along, you'll notice I'm just slightly pushing the blade and running it along the edge of that silver skin. And again, we're doing that so we can extract the best possible yield from this cut. And we're just about there. It's just slowly coming off there, as you can see, coming off nice and cleanly. It's just a matter of technique, this trick. And again, the main reason for doing that is to ensure that we get the best possible yield and best possible cut to cook scenario from this cut. So there you can see we have our first part of the flat iron removed. We now just need to turn that cut over, remove that top silver skin. Remember the underlying silver skin, the silver skin closest to the bone, at different times can have small amounts of bone fragment. So ideally, we wouldn't mix this into our ragout. That would be held separately as a stock item. Almost there. Now once again with our blunt knife, this is the part where we're filleting the fish. The blade goes flat to the board, and then we're basically running along the top of that silver skin, freeing away the lean meat above that. to reveal a beautiful flat iron steak. What we're left with, that residual silver skin, again, do not throw this away. This is liquid gold for any ragu. Mix this in with your mince, particularly for spaghetti bolognese, any braising dish. That silver skin will contribute amazing texture and juiciness to any cooked dish. So we keep that separate. We're rendering our fat. It's just a small amount for the stock bin. And we have here our Oyster Blade head, which as I talked about earlier, is just a magnificent piece of meat to braise as a whole piece. And then in true fusion style cooking, double cook that. So we'll braise that a couple of hours, let it rest, set, cut it into small portions, and then wok fry that with lots of punchy flavoured profiles, and absolutely delicious. What we have here is two extremely versatile flat iron steaks that are ready for any type of cuisine. So they're perfect products to stuff and put any sort of stuffing inside that. The fact that the texture fibres are quite small means that it won't push the contents of whatever you're putting inside there out. But even as small steaks, in fact there's restaurants around the world now that are actually named after the blade or after the flat iron and called either feather blade or flat iron, purely because this is probably one of the best cuts of meat off the carcass in terms of beautiful, delicious flavour, wonderful tenderness. With that, that is our oyster blade.